How does one go about finding a true, authentic spiritual guru in the modern world? This is the topic of Paul Brunton's classic spiritual travelogue, A Search in Secret India, published in 1934. It chronicles the author's pilgrimage across India in the early 1930s, driven by a deep intellectual necessity to find genuine spiritual realization amidst a landscape rife with superstition, miracle-mongering, and outright deception. Brunton, originally a skeptical British journalist, uses his rational Western mind as a filter to seek a verifiable truth, ultimately leading him to the famous silent sage Ramana Maharshi. Brunton's journey begins with a profound dissatisfaction with the West's modern materialism and a deep yearning for the promised wisdom of the East. His method is one of ruthless inquiry. He approaches every holy man and woman with respect, but also with intense and, I would say, healthy skepticism, determined to expose the counterfeit while identifying the authentic. Brunton traverses India, encountering a dizzying array of figures who claim mastery over so-called hidden or occult forces and spiritual realities. For example, we come across the magician of the North, Visuddhananda. One of Brunton's earliest and most spectacular encounters is with a yogi credited with incredible feats, most notably the power of flower materialization. Brunton witnesses the yogi apparently producing fresh roses and other items from an empty space. While acknowledging the inexplicable nature of the event, the author's rational core is not satisfied. He correctly observes that the mastery of siddhis, as they're known in yogic literature, or yogic powers, is merely mastery over nature's lower laws, not the ultimate attainment of the true self. This encounter serves to filter out the sensational. Magic, the author discovers, is not the goal. Next, Brunton visits the so-called silent messiah Meher Baba, who had taken a famous vow of silence. Brunton is impressed by the devotion of Baba's large following and his expansive philosophical claims to be an avatar. However, the experience ultimately leaves Brunton feeling that Baba's charismatic influence is a complex phenomenon, and he continues his search for a simpler, more self-evident realization. He next documents numerous ascetics and extreme yogis who practice astonishing feats of self-mortification, for example, lying on beds of nails, holding limbs aloft for decades, or maintaining silence for years. Brunton respects their discipline and commitment, but critiques the focus on the physical body as the instrument of salvation. He posits that such practices often lead to spiritual pride or extraordinary psychic powers, but not necessarily to the highest form of enlightenment. Siddhartha Gautama, who became the Buddha, famously tried these practices and himself found them insufficient. So, in summary, the first half of the book establishes the core conflict, the sheer difficulty of navigating India's spiritual chaos, particularly as a skeptical Western traveler, in search of a genuine pearl of wisdom. Once we reach the halfway point, Brunton's search comes to its culmination through an encounter with the one figure who, for him, embodies intellectual authority without materialist ambition. Indeed, Brunton meets the Shankaracharya, the spiritual head of a major Advaita Vedanta monastic tradition. If you'd like a video or a future presentation on the spiritual tradition of Advaita Vedanta, leave your thoughts in the comments below. This wise man, revered across India, is immediately recognized by the author as a profound intellectual and moral force. To the author, this person embodies an authentic spiritual purity that is neither miraculous nor theatrical. Now, the author asks Shankaracharya to become his guru, but as the head of a large monastic order, Shankaracharya has too many demands on his time and it simply would not be feasible. But it is this orthodox spiritual authority who instead advises Brunton where to go to find the deepest truth. Go to the hill of the holy beacon, Arunachala. There you will find one whom all know as the Maharshi. The master tells Brunton that the Maharshi represents the height of spiritual realization. Accordingly, Brunton travels to the small ashram or monastery near Tiruvannamalai, the city at the foot of Arunachala in South India. Brunton is struck by the Maharshi's humility and simplicity. He sits in a large hall, accessible to all, with no private appointments, no elaborate rituals, and no demands. The Maharshi's most potent teaching is not spoken, but communicated through a radiant, silent presence. Brunton records his philosophical and spiritual questions. The Maharshi's response, often delivered indirectly or through an interpreter, is consistently focused on one method, which resembles Zen in its simplicity and directness. This method we can call Atma Vichara, or self-inquiry, encapsulated in the question, who am I? The teaching is profound in its simplicity. The seeker is instructed to turn attention inward, tracing the source of the individual I thought back to the ultimate, universal self. The path is not one of external practice or ritual, but of internal, continuous deconstruction of the ego. Brunton recounts the most significant moment of his life using this method, an intense silent meditation session with Ramana Maharshi. He describes the sage fixing his gaze upon him, an act that triggered a sudden, profound, and utterly transformative mystical experience. Brunton felt his identity dissolve, replaced by an overwhelming, permanent sense of peace, timelessness, and infinite compassionate being. This realization, though fleeting in its intensity, was the culmination of his long and troubled search. He had found the truth he sought. Ramana Maharshi had proved his authenticity, not with a mere miracle, but with a direct transmission of transcendental consciousness. I think it would be helpful here to pause to reflect more on Ramana Maharshi's personal story. He was born in 1879 in a Tamil family in a village in the south of India. His life narrative is unique because his enlightenment or spiritual realization was entirely spontaneous, requiring no guru, no scriptural study, or conscious spiritual effort. He was a good student and, in his youth, known for his strong memory and deep comatose-like sleep, but he showed no outward or obvious sign of spiritual potential. But then, at the age of 16, while sitting alone in his uncle's house, he was suddenly engulfed by a powerful, visceral fear of death. But instead of panicking, he chose to confront it, lying down and mimicking the process of dying. He stiffened his body and mentally asked himself again and again, the body is dying, but when the body dies, do I die? In that moment of intense self-focus and scrutiny, Ramana had a profound, instantaneous realization that the I was an eternal, deathless, conscious presence, completely independent of the physical form. He emerged from this episode as a transformed being. The true self had been realized. Following this experience, all interest in worldly life vanished. He soon left home and traveled without a plan, driven solely by an inner pull to the sacred mountain of Arunachala, which he had heard of and felt a deep connection to since childhood. He lived in caves and temple niches, often suffering extreme physical hardship, but remained immersed in his realized state for the rest of his life. His ashram was eventually built around him, and he never left the mountain, serving as a silent, living exemplar of the truth. We come now to contextualizing Brunton's book in the modern spiritual landscape. Brunton's successful quest offers a stark contrast to the challenges faced by seekers in the modern world. I'm referring here firstly to the commercialization of mysticism. In the 1930s, authentic sages were often found in secluded, difficult to access locations. Today, spirituality is a global, multi-billion-dollar industry. The market is flooded with so-called lifestyle gurus and spiritual teachers who often prioritize profit, branding, and celebrity over genuine realization. The true test of a Satguru, an authentic master, is their indifference to money and fame, a test many modern figures fail spectacularly. Second, we have the rise of charisma over consciousness. The global media landscape rewards charisma, communication skill, and attractive personality. This incentivizes figures who are magnetic and articulate, but may lack the profound inner transformation demonstrated by the Ramana Maharshi. The authentic guru, like the Maharshi, may be silent, humble, and indifferent to attention, making them easily overlooked in the contemporary noise and confusion. And third, of course, there is the problem of power and abuse. The lack of traditional institutional checks and balances on Western-based spiritual movements has led to numerous well-documented cases of abuse, be it financial, emotional, and sexual, by charismatic leaders. This makes the modern seeker necessarily wary, requiring a level of critical discernment even greater than Brunton's to avoid exploitation and manipulation. Brunton's insistence on verifiable inner peace and ethical integrity remains the most crucial lesson. Let us now place his book in the wider genre. A Search in Secret India is a landmark work, bridging cultures and disciplines. It contributed to the creation of the modern subgenre of the spiritual travelogue, a genre that I'm experimenting writing with at present. I'll say more about that in my upcoming videos, so do make sure to subscribe to receive those notifications. Unlike earlier academic accounts, Brunton presents a first-person investigative narrative. He is the seeker, the detective, and the final recipient of the grace, making his journey highly relatable and inspiring. Moreover, published when knowledge of Indian metaphysics in the West was relatively minimal, his book performs the crucial role of helping to popularize key concepts. It made concepts like yoga, meditation, and the self more accessible and desirable to Western intellectuals and the general public, setting the stage for the so-called New Age movement and the subsequent mass adoption of Eastern practices. The book remains Ramana Maharshi's most significant introduction to the West. Brunton's journalistic integrity ensured that the Maharshi's teachings were presented clearly, without unnecessary embellishment or dogmatism, ensuring that the message of self-inquiry found its way to a global audience. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe, leaving your thoughts in the comment section below. I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Until then.